Let me tell you something about grief. It doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your brain, too. It makes you do things, wild, irrational, financially irresponsible things, and somehow convince yourself that every single one of them makes perfect sense. That's the only explanation I have for why I spent 4 years wiring $1,500 every single month to a woman I never really liked. Every single month. Don't do the math. I already did. It'll make you sick. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Phyllis Gruber. I'm a 53-year-old accountant from Columbus, Ohio. I clip coupons. I comparison shop for motor oil. I once drove 40 minutes out of my way to save $11 on a Thanksgiving turkey. So you tell me how a woman like me ended up hemorrhaging money for 4 straight years and didn't blink once. One word. Garrett. Garrett Monroe was my little brother. Emphasis on little. Because even at 41 years old, the man had the emotional maturity of a golden retriever. Loud, lovable, always getting into something he had absolutely no business getting into. But he was mine, my little brother, my headache, my favorite person on earth. He called me every Sunday, every single Sunday, without fail. Didn't matter where he was, didn't matter what time zone. Garrett always called. File. He was the only person alive who called me File. You eat today. Garrett, I'm 50 years old. That's not what I asked. That was us. That was every Sunday for 30 years. And then one Tuesday in March, 4 years ago, a police officer knocked on my door and told me there had been an accident on I-70. A truck. Bad weather. Garrett's car. They said he didn't suffer. I've never believed that. Not for 1 second. But I held on to it anyway, the way you hold on to things that aren't true just to keep yourself standing upright. Now, Nora Whitfield, or as I called her in my head, and occasionally out loud to my best friend, Nora the Vague. Garrett met Nora at a work conference in Phoenix 3 years before he died. He called me that same night, absolutely beside himself. Phil, I met someone. She's incredible, she's smart, and she's funny, and is she employed? Phyllis. It's a valid question. He married her 14 months later. Small ceremony. Nora wore ivory. Ivory, not white. She made sure everyone knew the difference, and gave a toast at her own wedding that was somehow entirely about herself. I smiled through the whole thing. I am a good sister. Was a good sister. The thing about Nora was that she was never unkind, exactly. She was just distant. Like she was always standing behind a glass wall, looking at you, performing warmth without actually producing any. You'd walk away from a conversation with her feeling vaguely unsatisfied, like a meal that looked great but had no flavor. Garrett adored her, so I kept my mouth shut. When he died, Nora fell apart, and I mean apart. She couldn't work, couldn't function, couldn't, according to her, even open her own mail. I stepped in, because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. I sorted the bills. I handled the insurance. I sat on her kitchen floor at 2 a.m. while she cried, rubbing circles on her back, thinking about how Garrett would want me to do exactly this. And then, about 3 weeks after the funeral, Nora sat across from me at her kitchen table wrapped in one of Garrett's old sweatshirts, and she said, very quietly, very carefully, Phyllis, I don't know how I'm going to manage. I looked at her. Financially, she added, his income is just gone, and the life insurance is taking forever to process, and she trailed off, dabbed her eyes. And Phyllis Ann Gruber, coupon clipper, turkey hunter, woman who once returned a partially used bottle of shampoo because it didn't lather correctly, said, I'll help, whatever you need. $1,500 a month. Her suggestion, technically. She mentioned the rent, the car note, the utilities. I did the math right there at the table, nodded, said absolutely. And just like that, it became a standing arrangement. I won't lie to you. The first year, it felt right. Felt good, even. Like I was honoring Garrett somehow. Like every wire transfer was a small act of love in his memory. The second year, it felt more like habit than grief. The third year, I noticed something. Nora stopped crying. Now you'll say, well, Phyllis, people heal. People move on. That's healthy, and you're right. Except Nora didn't just stop crying. Nora started glowing. New haircut. New clothes. A laugh I'd never heard before. This loose, unguarded thing that seemed to belong to someone else entirely. She redecorated the apartment. She got a dog. A very expensive, very tiny dog with a name I can only describe as aggressively French. Meanwhile, every first of the month, $1,500. Gone. I told myself she deserved to be happy. Garrett would want her happy. Garrett would want her happy. I said that so many times it became a kind of prayer. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I'd just gotten back from the pharmacy and I was annoyed about a parking ticket, when Barb Kowalski knocked on my door. Now Barb Kowalski is my neighbor of 11 years. Retired schoolteacher. Grows tomatoes on her balcony. Opinions about everything. Delivery on nothing. The woman has never in 11 years knocked on my door without something to say. I opened the door. She was standing there in her housecoat, arms crossed, mouth pressed into that thin line she gets when she's decided something. "Phyllis," she said, "are you still sending that woman money?" I blinked. "Hello to you too, Barb. Are you?" "That's not really, because I think you should stop." I stared at her. "Barb, Nora lost her husband. My brother. She's... Watch her apartment, Phyllis. Just like that. Flat. Certain." The way she used to tell third graders the answer was wrong. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said, pulling her housecoat tighter, "that there are things you don't know, and I think it's time you knew them." She turned around and walked back to her apartment. I stood in my doorway holding a pharmacy bag, a parking ticket in my pocket, and the sudden nauseating feeling that the last 4 years of my life were about to be turned completely inside out. I just didn't know yet how right I was. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. I want you to understand something about me before I continue. I am not a dramatic person. I don't spiral. I don't catastrophize. When my car battery died on the highway 2 winters ago, I pulled over, called a tow truck, and ate a granola bar while I waited. Calm, collected, completely unbothered. I tell you this so you appreciate just how deeply Barb Kowalski's 6 words rattled something loose inside my chest. Watch her apartment, Phyllis. I closed my front door, stood in my hallway, stared at the wall for a solid 2 minutes. Then I did what any calm, collected, completely unbothered person would do. I pulled a chair to my window, and I watched that apartment. Nora didn't live close to me. About 40 minutes away, on the east side, 3rd floor of a building called the Meridian, which is the kind of name that sounds expensive but isn't. I'd been there dozens of times. Knew the parking lot. Knew the buzzer code. Knew the super's name was Gerald, and he smelled faintly of cigarettes and regret. But I couldn't exactly park outside her building with binoculars like some kind of discount private investigator. So the next morning I called Barb. She picked up on the first ring. She'd been waiting. "Tell me what you saw," I said. No good morning. No preamble. "Come over," she said. I walked the 12 feet from my door to hers. She had coffee ready. Of course she did. Barb has coffee ready the way other people have opinions ready. Always, immediately, and stronger than you were prepared for. She sat down across from me at her kitchen table and folded her hands. "My sister lives in Nora's building," she began. I did not know this. 11 years, and I did not know this. "Loretta, 2nd floor. She's been there 6 years. We talk every few days." "Okay," I said slowly. "About 8 months ago, Loretta started mentioning a man." I set my coffee down. "Not in a gossip way," Barb said, holding up one finger. "In a noticing way. Loretta notices things. It's her gift and her curse, bless her heart. She noticed this man because he came and went at odd hours. Not overnight, at least not at first. But regular, consistent, always the same man, always apartment 4B. "That's Nora's apartment," I said. My voice came out remarkably steady for a woman whose stomach had just dropped through the floor. "That's Nora's apartment," Barb confirmed. "Barb." I pressed my fingers to my temple. "Lots of people have. Visitors. That doesn't mean..." "Loretta saw them at the mailboxes last month." She paused. "Let that sit." He was picking up her mail. "Phyllis. His name is on her mailbox." The kitchen went very quiet. "How long?" I asked. "Loretta thinks at least 6 months. But she said the way they carry on, the comfort between them. It looks a lot longer than that." I picked my coffee back up, took a long, slow sip, stared at Barb's tomato plant on the windowsill. "Barb," I finally said, "people are allowed to move on. Garrett's been gone 4 years. If Nora found someone, the man's name," Barb said, cutting me off with the precision of a woman who taught school for 31 years and has 0 patience for people missing the point, "is Gary." I froze. Loretta heard Nora call him that in the hallway. Gary. And she said, "Now I'm telling you exactly what Loretta told me." She said the man laughs like someone who's been laughing his whole life, and never quite learned to keep it down. The granola bar feeling was gone, completely gone, Because Garrett Monroe, my brother, my Sunday phone call, my Garrett had the loudest, most uncontrollable, most obnoxious laugh of any human being I had ever encountered in my 5 decades on this earth. It was legendary. It was embarrassing. It once got us asked to leave a movie theater during a funeral scene. My mouth went dry. It's probably a coincidence, I whispered. And even as the words left my mouth, I knew. I absolutely knew. They were the words of a woman trying very hard not to know what she already knew. Barb just looked at me. "Go see for yourself," she said quietly. I drove to the Meridian on a Thursday evening. I told myself I was just going to check on Nora. Normal visit. Nothing strange about it. I'd done it dozens of times. I even stopped and bought a candle from the Home Goods on 5th, because that's what you do when you visit people. You bring a candle and you pretend everything is fine, even when everything is the complete opposite of fine. I sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes first. Grip on the steering wheel. Engine off. Candle in the passenger seat, like a silent accessory to whatever I was about to walk into. Then I buzzed. Nora's voice came through the intercom almost immediately. Light, relaxed, happy even. "Who is it?" "It's Phyllis." A beat. Just a half second too long. "Phyllis, oh, hi, come on up." The door buzzed open. Here's the thing about confronting a truth you're not ready for. Your body knows before your brain catches up. My hands were steady on the railing going up those stairs. My face was composed. My breathing was normal. But my knees were having a completely separate, much more honest reaction to the situation. I knocked on 4B. Nora opened the door almost too quickly. She was dressed nicely. Nicer than you dress for an unannounced Thursday visit. Her hair was done. She was wearing perfume. Phyllis. She leaned in for a hug that felt approximately 1 degree warmer than our usual hugs. "This is a surprise. I wish you'd called. I was in the neighborhood," I said, which was a lie. Nobody is just in the neighborhood of the Meridian on the east side on a Thursday evening. She knew it too. I watched it flicker across her face. Come in, come in." She stepped back, smiled. That performance warmth smile I'd known for years. "I'll put the kettle on." I stepped inside. The apartment was different, brighter. There were new throw pillows, a different rug, a pair of men's sneakers by the door, large ones worn in the way shoes get worn when they live somewhere permanently, not when they visit. I clocked them, said nothing. Nora was already in the kitchen, moving around with the energy of a woman who needed something to do with her hands. "How have you been?" she called out. "Fine," I said. I was still standing near the entrance, looking around slowly. "You redecorated?" "Oh, just a few things. Needed a refresh, you know how it is. Both recently used. Both still warm-looking." "You have company?" I asked. A pause from the kitchen. "Just a breath too long. My cousin stopped by earlier," she said. "He just left." I looked at those 2 mugs. I looked at those sneakers. I sat down on the couch, and that's when I heard it. From behind the closed bedroom door, barely audible, almost nothing, the sound of someone shifting their weight. The soft, unmistakable creak of a person trying very hard not to make a sound. And then, because apparently God has a sense of humor so dark it ought to come with a warning label, a cough. A short, low, completely involuntary cough. I knew that cough. I had heard that cough every winter for 41 years. I had handed that cough drops and ginger tea and unsolicited advice about scarves. I had complained about that cough in movie theaters and church pews, and once, memorably, at a job interview I was accompanying him to for moral support. My brother had a very distinctive cough, and my brother was supposedly dead. The kettle started screaming from the kitchen. Neither of us moved. I stared at that bedroom door. The door stared back, and I said, very calmly, very quietly, in a voice I barely recognized as my own, "Nora, tell him to come out." The kettle kept screaming. Nora didn't answer. The bedroom door didn't open, and I sat there on that couch holding a Home Goods candle in my lap like an idiot, waiting for my dead brother to walk back into my life. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So thank you for real. Let me paint you a picture. A woman, sitting on a couch, holding a scented candle, warm vanilla sugar since you asked, in a dead man's apartment, waiting for that dead man to walk out of a bedroom he was very much alive in. That woman was me. And I want you to know, at that moment, I was the calmest I had been in 4 years. Not because I was okay, not even close, but because something extraordinary happens to a person when the thing they feared most and the thing they secretly hoped for arrived at exactly the same time. You don't cry, you don't scream, you just go very, very still. Like the whole world is made of glass, and you're the only one who knows it. The kettle screamed. Nora turned it off. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. I heard her set the kettle down. I heard her breathe. I heard her whisper something, so low I couldn't make out the words, in the direction of the hallway. And then the bedroom door opened. I don't know what I expected. Some Hollywood version, maybe. Slow motion, swelling music. A man emerging looking gaunt and haunted and appropriately ashamed. What I got was Garrett Monroe, in a gray Ohio State sweatshirt and socks, standing in a doorway looking like a man who had just been caught stealing from the cookie jar and hadn't yet decided whether to confess or run. He looked exactly the same. That was the part that undid me, just a little. Not the anger. That was coming, trust me. It was absolutely coming. But the sheer, unchanged, unaffected sameness of him. Same broad shoulders, same slightly too long hair he could never be bothered to cut. Same sheepish half-smile he'd been deploying since 1987 to get himself out of trouble. He looked at me. I looked at him. And Garrett Monroe, my dead brother, said, "Hey, File. Hey, File. 4 years, $72,000, a police officer on my doorstep, a funeral where I held Nora's hand and cried until I couldn't breathe. Hey, Phil." I set the candle down on the coffee table very carefully, smoothed my hands on my knees, took one slow breath. "You have," I said, "about 30 seconds to start talking before I start screaming. And I mean screaming, Garrett. I mean the kind of screaming that brings Gerald the super up here, and possibly law enforcement." He flinched. Good. He sat down in the armchair across from me. Nora stayed in the kitchen doorway, arms wrapped around herself, doing the glass wall thing she'd always done, except now the glass wall had a very specific, very guilty quality to it. Garrett leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Couldn't look at me directly, which was smart of him, because I was currently looking at him with an energy that could strip paint. "I need you to know," he started, "that I never wanted you involved. That was never part of—" "Garrett." He stopped. "You faked your death." A pause. "Yes. The accident. The police. The funeral. The coffin was weighted," he said quietly. "There was nobody. I'm sorry, Phyllis. I know how that sounds. I know what that— Do you?" My voice cracked on the second word, and I hated it. Hated that he got to see that. "Do you know what it sounds like to get a call that your brother is dead? Do you know what it sounds like to plan a funeral for someone who is apparently in perfectly good health in apartment 4B? He closed his eyes. "Start from the beginning," I said. "All of it. Right now. Here is what my brother told me. 3 years before he supposedly died, Garrett had gotten himself into business with a man I'll only describe as the kind of person your mother warned you about, and your father would have recognized on sight. A private investment deal. The kind with no paperwork, no oversight, and astronomical promised returns, which is Wall Street speak for a trap that only looks like an opportunity when you're standing too close to it. Garrett lost money, then he lost more money, then he lost money that wasn't technically his yet, but that he'd made promises about, which is somehow even worse. The man he owed, and the people around that man, were not the type to accept a payment plan. They made it very clear, Garrett said, staring at the floor, that there were 2 ways out. I could pay back every dollar, which I couldn't, or I could disappear, permanently. I stared at him. "So you chose door number 2. "I chose to live, Phyllis. You chose to let me think you were dead." The words came out louder than I intended. Garrett flinched again. Nora made a small sound from the doorway. I pressed my fingers to my eyes, breathed. "Keep going," I said. The plan, he explained, was supposed to be temporary, 6 months, maybe a year, long enough for things to cool down, for the people he owed to move on to the next catastrophe and forget about Garrett Monroe. Nora knew. From the beginning, Nora knew. She'd helped plan it, the staged accident, the weighted coffin, the whole production. And the $1,500 a month. That was supposed to be Nora maintaining the appearance of a grieving widow. Bills to pay, life to sustain, nothing suspicious. Nobody questions a widow. But 6 months became a year. A year became 2. The danger passed. Garrett admitted that somewhere around 18 months in, the threat had genuinely dissolved. The men he owed had bigger problems. He was forgotten. And still he stayed dead. I looked at him for a long time. "Why?" I asked, and my voice was different now. Quieter. The anger was still there. Oh, it was still very much there. It had simply reorganized itself into something more precise and more devastating. If the danger was gone, why didn't you come back? Garrett opened his mouth. I closed it. I looked at his hands, and that's when Nora spoke, because I didn't want him to. I turned to look at her. She'd moved from the doorway, was standing in the middle of the room, now arms still crossed, but something different in her posture. Less glass wall, more exposed. Like she'd finally gotten tired of the performance. The life insurance paid out, she said. The money from you came every month. And Garrett and we were finally happy. No debt, no stress, no looking over our shoulders. She paused. We were just living. I stared at her. On my money, I said. She didn't answer, which was of course its own kind of answer. I turned back to Garrett. She threatened you, I said. It wasn't a question. I'd already worked it out in the 45 seconds she'd been talking. When you want to come clean, she threatened to expose you. The look on Garrett's face confirmed it before he said a single word. That was the thing about my brother. He'd never been able to hide anything from me. Not at 9 years old sneaking Halloween candy. Not at 19 coming home past curfew. Not now, at 45 sitting in a dead man's armchair in a dead man's apartment. She said if I contacted you, if I tried to come back. He stopped, swallowed. She'd go to the people I owed. Tell them I was alive. Tell them where I was. And you believed her. I had no reason not to. I stood up. Both of them watched me. I walked to the window. I looked out at the parking lot. At my car sitting there under a yellow light. Completely ordinary. Completely unaware of the nuclear crater that had formed in the last 40 minutes. I thought about 4 years of Sundays with no phone call. 4 years of picking up my phone to call him, and then remembering, and that remembering being like a small, fresh wound every single time. I thought about sitting at his grave with a cup of coffee I'd bought for him out of pure habit, because he always had coffee on Sundays, and feeling so profoundly stupid when I realized what I was doing. I thought about $72,000. I turned around. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Both of them went very still. Garrett, you have 2 weeks to figure out how you're going to make this right. With me. With the law. With whatever version of your life you're building here. 2 weeks. He nodded, barely breathing. I looked at Nora, held her gaze for a long moment. Every dollar, I said. Every single dollar I sent. I want it back. She opened her mouth. Don't, I said. Whatever you are about to say, don't. She closed it. I picked up the warm vanilla sugar candle from the coffee table. I looked at it. Then I set it back down and left it there, because I had bought that candle for a grieving widow, and there was no grieving widow in this apartment. There was just a liar, and the brother who loved her anyway, and me, standing in the wreckage of 4 years trying to decide if any of it was salvageable. I drove home in complete silence. No music, no podcasts, just the road and the dark and the hum of the engine. Halfway home, my phone rang. Garrett. I stared at his name on the screen. Garrett Monroe, just like that, alive in my contacts like he'd never left. And I let it ring. But here's the thing about grief, and I say this as a woman who has now grieved the same person twice. The second time is different. The first time, grief is a door slamming shut. Final. Absolute. You stand on one side of it and the person you lost is on the other, and there is nothing you can do about it. The second time, grief is a door standing wide open, and on the other side is your very alive, very stupid, very sorry little brother who has a lot of explaining to do and approximately 72,000 reasons to start. I let it ring once more. Then I picked up. Garrett. His voice was wrecked, raw in a way I hadn't heard since our mother died. I am so sorry. I know that's not enough. I know it's nowhere near enough. But I need you to know that not a single day went by that Sunday, I said. He stopped. Call me Sunday, I said. Like you used to. And we'll figure out the rest. A long silence, and then, quietly broken, completely overwhelming in its familiarity, my dead brother started to cry. I gripped the steering wheel, kept driving. And for the first time in 4 years, when I thought about Garrett Monroe, I didn't feel the door slam shut. I felt it swing open. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.